So, welcome. This is Ray Rigoglioso. I am the founder of Gay Men of Wisdom, and this is a recap from our discussion group from Monday, November 18th, 2013. The topic we explored was gay men as evolutionaries. So, let me just set the stage with a few words prior to going into the recap. So, what do I even mean by evolutionary? So, evolution, in the Darwinian sense of the word, refers to changes in the inherited characteristics of biological populations over successive generations. Now, Darwin observed that those species that adapt best are the ones that survive. Now, we tend to think of evolution in terms of reproduction, meaning that the people who reproduce are the ones who help humanity survive and evolve. And by extension, since gay men tend not to reproduce nearly as much, our collective thinking assigns little value to our contributions. We might make things pretty, but it is heterosexuals who carry humanity forward. Now, before we had Darwin, this entire continent of North America was filled with native tribes that understood how third and fourth gender people contributed to the welfare and vitality and survival of their groups. In Native America, third gender people tended to reproduce less, just as gay men do today. And yet, in Native America, as in the current day, gay men showed up in generation after generation. We keep showing up. So we've all asked ourselves this question: why would a type of people who tend not to reproduce keep showing up in all parts of the human family? Well, what if we're asking the question too narrowly? What if we're not seeing the big picture? What if gay men played an indirect biological role in the survival of the human species? What if our presence created the best conditions for the next generation to be born into? What if the quality of life that gay men helped to create were humanity's evolutionary advantage? Do societies that have more thriving gay male communities have an advantage over those where there is widespread oppression? It's a question. So, in our discussion group on November 18th, we explored the following questions. How do gay men contribute to the survival of humanity? How do you, meaning the men who attended, help your friends, family, and community evolve? So, here are some of the responses that I heard to our first question: how do gay men help contribute to the survival of humanity? Well, one man said that we bring society back into balance, both biologically through population control, but more importantly through our spiritual, artistic, cultural, and creative contributions. Another man suggested that we challenge the status quo, that we foster change simply by being ourselves. And this person said that humanity is hardwired to resist change. And yet gay men embody change in a real-time way, that we make it easier for other people to seek changes in their own lives and to realize their potential. It's again this theme of allowing and giving others permission that keeps showing up again and again in this work. One member stated that in our lifetime we've come out. And this is a revolutionary act that sets off millions of transformations. When you think about ripples going out, the millions of transformations around us and all out into the world. Someone was suggesting that we have a different way of looking at things and that this itself creates change. And that all of the archetypes, the gay archetypes that I talk about in this work, that these model different ways of being. Someone else suggested that we are less inclined to turn to violence, that we would rather resolve and collaborate. And this is really accessing that feminine part of ourselves. Now, we're coming out of an ostracized period we talked about, and so we can model a different way of dealing with problems because we're really getting to a point where society is changing how it sees us. So we can really assume a leadership role and we can model different ways of being for humanity. So I asked the men, how do you serve as a model for humanity? Someone suggested that I model how to find the middle ground. I help people see the world differently. That you can control your reactions to things. You might not be able to control the actual things that are happening, but you can control your reactions. We started to talk about sex and heartfelt connections, and that gay men have a connection to their feminine, and that real intimacy between men makes us stronger, not weaker. That was a very interesting thread of conversation. So then I asked, how are you an evolutionary? And I had, there were some really interesting questions. One man said, I'm an agent of change in my professional life. I help people who are struggling with complex problems move to a next values-based steps. This person said, I sell evolution. And I choose among the archetypes when needed. I move among them, which because the archetypes can really be different parts of oneself. And I thought that was a brilliant observation, that these archetypes are not necessarily different roles, but different parts of who we are as gay men, and that we can shift in and out of them as needed. And we concluded with an exploration of how we model and balance the masculine and feminine. So this was a smaller group we had on November 18th, and a really rich, deep conversation about how gay men contribute to the evolution and welfare and vitality of the human species. So again, I'm Ray Rigoglioso, founder of Gay Men of Wisdom. Thanks for being with me.